Holly. I'm the MD of BEMA. Welcome to BEMA's fourth and audience with. This is a series we are running every fortnight until I guess people stop saying yes. We launched it during lockdown to really kind of inspire and challenge the BEMA community, to give you a bit of a glimpse into the future from some really, amazing, insightful people, and hopefully to get you out of what is a pretty mundane day-to-day existence for some of us anyway. So today we have the author Sam Cornett. He's written some amazing books, done some amazing things. I will not introduce him here. I will hand over to our host in a minute, who's going to talk more about what he's done up to date. So before I do that, I just wanted to extol the virtues of BEMA a little bit and implore you to get involved. So if you don't know that much about us, we are the UK's largest digital and tech community. We're really all about digital talent wherever it is. So whether that's agencies of all different shapes and sizes, tech companies, little and large, startups, in-house teams at brands and digital marketers, and everything in between. The one common thread is around innovation and really driving the industry forward. So whether that's going out to students in secondary schools across the UK, encouraging them to look at the digital industry as a future career option, mentoring, learning and development opportunities for those people in industry, or driving thought leadership and the industry forward through our 20 different councils and think tanks. It's all about pushing the industry forward, making it a fairer, more successful, more positive one. So if you would like to get involved, please do give me or my team a shout. We are actually running kind of every fortnight at the moment, a kind of Meet BEMA 30-minute session. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. and then I think we have another one next Friday at 10 a.m. So that's a really good way just to get an understanding of more about what we do and ask any questions that you have. So that is enough of me. I would like to introduce our host for this evening. Alongside Tarek Nasir, Nat Gross is our co-president at BEMA. She's 3-4 years in. 3 years in, I think. Many years in. Oh dear. Her day job is a VP of Brand and Marketing for EPAM, a global design and engineering company. But today she definitely has her BEMA hat on. So over to you, Nat.
Thank you, Holly. Good evening to everybody. Welcome. Glad that you're here to join us with our audience and we're delighted to have Sam with us. So we have about 40 minutes together. We're going to make this as interactive as possible. So please do post your questions as we go along. We'll be taking and answering questions as we go, so don't wait till the end to interact. If we do run out of time, or if you want to carry on the conversation, Sam will be on Twitter for 10-15 minutes after we finished our conversation, so do join us there. So to kick things off, I'm going to briefly introduce Sam to you, though I'm pretty sure if you're here, you've got a pretty good idea of who he is. So Sam's career began earlier than most. In his teens, he ran nightclubs and managed bands across South London, an occupation that eventually evolved into his first startup, the BAFTA-winning content agency, Don't Panic. And with a clear appetite to challenge the norms, Sam went on to co-found Liberty, the first of its kind ethical marketing agency that today serves as an international youth network. And most recently, Sam has become a best-selling author with his first book, Be More Pirate, or How to Take on the World and Win, published by Penguin here in the UK. So for BEMA, our paths first crossed with Sam through Liberty, or certainly mine did, whom we've worked with closely over the last few years. Liberty is an absolutely awesome organisation, and the rest of our BEMA community clearly thinks so too, when in 2017 Liberty became the first agency to win the Grand Prix at BEMA, which is usually bestowed upon a piece of work, but it was actually awarded to Liberty for redefining the agency model. So Sam, I've given some of the headlines. I know that you've got something great in store to give us some more colour on your career to date. And so we're going to hand over to you, really keen to hear more about where you've been, what happened when the book was published, and obviously we'll get to the present day as we move through the conversation. So Sam, welcome, over to you.
Thanks, Nat, and thanks, Holly. Thanks, everyone. And oh shit, wait a minute. You'd think I'd know what I was doing by now. Oh God, it's terrible. Is he doing that on purpose? I'm not quite sure. Hold on. Wait, where are we? Okay, so there we are. Right, so things are going a little bit slow. So welcome to yet another Zoom, a Zoom of doom. Have we all become Zoombies by now? I only heard that phrase the other day. I quite like it. I've got this idea, actually, of making a video of myself talking, which would then get me out of any future Zoom meetings. But I'm not sure that it's going to work. I think that would be a terrible thing to do, like to kind of misplace everyone's trust and then make a video of yourself so you can get away with it. But this afternoon, in anticipation of this call, I got really excited. And the things that make me, respect Beamer, the notion of interactivity and marketing, I think, is fundamentally about fucking around. And so this afternoon, I didn't do any work, and I fucked around making a presentation. I've gaffer taped a green screen to the wall, and I've made a silly video, and a couple of other things that hopefully will make this not just another Zoom call, and will respond to the challenge and the beef that Nat and Holly set me to tell you a little bit about the past. That hopefully helps not just inform you about my future, but the future that we're all going to face, because that's the interesting thing about right now. I think the opportunity reflection that rarely comes to any of us, certainly not in our industry. The chance to really think. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of hours, and it's been a glorious day to do so. So join me in some reflections. So the first question was about the past and where I've come from. So I've made this little kind of diagram, like which way around am I going to go? It starts down here when I left school, and I started a band. It was the first great thing I did, and then I got a job as in retail, and then my manager died. He got a heart attack about me. I became a chef. I launched a nightclub called Super Nature. That led to Don't Panic. Then in turn, Don't Panic turned into Liberty. Then Liberty became amazing, and then we had this massive round of redundancies. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And then I had this big existential crisis, and that led me to launch Live Magazine, How I Work with Young People. And then this thing called Social Enterprise that formed, and Gordon Brown made me a social enterprise, and that was really, really cool. And then I got made a global CSR leader, and then it got really, really terrible, and everything got very, very dark, and I left to leave Liberty. And then I wrote this book called Be My Pirate, and it brought me back into the world of all the kind of things that I love. And then I got divorced, and that was terrible. And then I invented this whole new idea, and then we won the Beamers. And are you there?
Yeah, that just went a bit strange for a minute, but we got you when we won the Beamers.
Good. I mean, if there was never a better place to leave you.
Exactly.
I mean, if there was anything that was going to break Zoom, it was going to be that. You get the gist. The point is, for me, this was me half my life ago, when I had this really clear and profound idea that I always was going to make some kind of difference, some kind of change in the world. Yet I had no idea what that change was going to be. These were the nightclubs that I used to run that formed the record label that then in turn became Don't Panic. It was super clear that we were going to change the world, and never clear how we were going to do it. And the same happened with Don't Panic. We set out to make this agency that was going to challenge every brand that ever there was under the sun, and yet it somehow has become one of the most awarded agencies under the sun. And the work it does now, so profound in its impact, the creativity it has, and still it has all of its roots in that past. And for me, it naturally bled into Liberty, this crazy, wonderful world where I got to interact with the smartest young people you could ever meet, endless streams of government ministers, and then bonkersness, the kind of range of clients that we used to have into that room. And never was it made so clear for me than when I went back in after the amazing, incredible Alex Goat had taken control, and I would look at this now well-run place and marvel that there was no one running around on fire, and far less people in tears than had ever been in my day. And my final day was this. This is us over the moon at winning at the Beamers. The accolade, because we'd set out to do this thing of changing the world, to be recognized for changing the industry model. And also for me personally, because I've been challenged so many times on what was my arc going to be. And I'd said that I'd leave this awesome youth organization when I got old. And people had said to me many times, what does old mean? And I'd always said 40, because I'd set Liberty up when I was in my early 20s. So 40 was the apocalypse. And suddenly, and this is the year that I was 40, this is my little booth just there. And this is the team taking my notion of stepping back literally as they push me back off the stage. And then this moment happened, this moment of big reflection, like this journey that I've been on of who am I and change and where does it come from? And all change becomes institutionalized in the end, and even liberty and everything we stood for. If you're going to make change, you have to become part of the institution. And so I wrote this book, this love letter to change, the generation that I'd seen come through liberty that have really taught me any more than anything else in the world, a love letter to them to not grow up and do the same things that we'd done, because the only optimism at that point I really drew was from the young leaders I saw, certainly not the current leaders that we find ourselves in. I was very lucky, as said, to get published by Penguin. And the day came when we were planning the launch, and I found out that my budget was going to be 0. And, you know, as marketeers, we're all used to a small budget, right? Oh, some of us, depends where you work. I certainly am. And motherfucker, right? I spent my whole life, you know, this was the culmination of my whole life. Now, I wasn't going to deal with that. You know, now my background was a bit nightclub. So when it came to the day of launch, I pulled in some favors and I fly posted the front of Penguin. It's on Vauxhall Bridge Road between the River Thames and Vauxhall Bridge, Victoria Station. It's 3 lanes of arterial traffic. The out of home value would be phenomenal, right? So I came along 7 o'clock in the morning with some guys I knew from my club days, and we made a massive, like no permission. I'd forged a clipboard of permission. And it was the biggest disaster ever. The biggest risk I ever took and the biggest mistake I ever made. And everyone at Penguin felt sorry for me. They thought I was going to be the first author to lose his book deal on the day of his launch. And nothing showed up. You know how it goes. You put everything into your launch, and just that whole morning was just, oh my God. And then about lunchtime, something began to shift, and I'd made a bit of content, and we managed to get 1 or 2 pieces, and campaign wrote something. And then by mid-afternoon, something up. And then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Richard bloody Branson tweets a thing, right? Take some credit for it. I mean, fuck it, who cares? And at this point, then suddenly it begins to trend, and the book went global. We hit bestseller in the UK. We hit bestseller around the world. The whole thing just took off. I managed to get myself a US deal just before Donald Trump came for his protection against the Houses of Parliament. That got us on TV. We spent the morning advertising on the underground story, if that was any of your rants that we borrowed or gave back. The book came out in the States, and this was very difficult because the US publisher wasn't going to let me anywhere near marketing in the United States. And I was Googling who are the most influential book reading celebrities in the US, and it came up, right? Bill Gates, not a surprise. Gary Vee, wherever he is, also not a surprise. Ryan Gosling, who would have thought? So tried to get in touch with agents, tried to get in touch with managers, tried all sorts of things, couldn't work out how I could possibly do this, and then decided to do something instead.
Your audio's dropped out a little.
Photoshopped my book back into the hands of some of the leading celebs of the US, got myself in all manner of trouble until I managed to find my way all the way to Oprah. Of course, not actually Oprah, but she was arguing the case for her book of the year. And it was about the them and us, she said. It was about the change that we've got to make, she said. And so I felt like it was almost about us. And this wave of support, I just saw a note about the Rebel Book Club, from agency, from young people, from networks, the spirit of frustration that was felt, that allowed me, gave me permission to take the piss in a you know, my life, my work has always been about challenging rules, and for many of us that's interesting, but to really do it, to feel this weight of support behind me. You know, this is post Trump's election, post Brexit, you know, and there's not many answers. The book doesn't really offer like answers clearly, but something happened, something lifted me up, and it was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And my gratitude to the wave that took place since was phenomenal. I then got invited around the world. This is Vans, but the you know, from Vans to Lego to Mercedes to Rolex to Rebel to hundreds and hundreds of organizations. I've stood in front of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, if you put into all the conferences, talking about the notion and the need for rebellion, talking about the spirit of this kind of practical approach, you know, telling the truth about the millennials of the 18th century who didn't reject society. They rewrote the rules of society, exactly what we need to do now. And it became a sensation, and we've all been there. Everyone on this call has been there. We've sat in bullshit brainstorms talking about innovation, disruption, transformation, and known full well that we're going back to our desks to do nothing. At best, maybe write a fucking white paper and send it away for a few months so that there's an excuse for doing nothing. And in these sessions, this thing happened, this moment emerged when we talked about actually what the real problem is, because something about the Spirit Pirates allowed a degree of honesty and creativity that hadn't gone before. You know, when there's no post-it notes in the room to kind of divest your responsibility for your imagination to. And then somebody came up with a really good idea. Somebody who has close proximity to the real problem every single day and isn't the soundbite specialist or the kind of charismatic narcissist that we have in most positions of leadership now, obviously not you. And suddenly the real answer came. And I asked the room to stand up in support of the real answer, the real solution, if they wanted to see it happen, to not ask for permission or have to turn it into a white paper, a strategy or anything else, and not another bloody deck. And the room stood and everyone argued and this mutiny took place. And for someone who spent the whole life seeking change, all of a sudden I saw how change happened. And it's a redistribution of power. It's a reorganization within systems, and it's entirely possible, and it takes place overnight. And I spent the next year doing that, getting booked by incredible places, promising to do a lovely talk about pirates, and then once in there, committing mutiny, mutinous acts, encouraging people to stand on tables, say what was wrong about the organization, get the room up in arms, and get their bosses to agree there and then to do the right thing. And then tomorrow, they began doing it. Phenomenal. For someone who'd been so frustrated by the end of liberty, like a life spent so close in proximity of making real change to real people's lives, suddenly here was change at a mass scale. I felt freedom, a freedom that I'd never felt before. I put it into a framework called the Institute of Professional Rule Breaking. And there's an irony, of course, to putting a framework around rule breaking, but nonetheless I did, because I could see a journey that I'd go on with this thing. I called it the Institute of Professional Rule Breaking because I wanted to take the piss. I wanted to take the piss out of IDEO and the RSA and all this other like talk but don't do tanks. And it was going somewhere very special. This whole idea, this spirit of community, this rebellion, this frustration that we're all kind of feeling in an underlying way, but sometimes find it difficult to articulate. I've booked until next year. And as I mentioned, I've been through some personal turbulence. And so not only was it the impact that I've always dreamed of, but it facilitated the finances that I needed for my nice little family that's dispersed across 2 houses. And then all of a fucking sudden, this bookings across the world went to this. And I'm sure in many ways, everyone experienced a little moment of this in March, when over the course of 5 days, hundreds of thousands of pounds, tons of bookings, the best trips, clients, amazing opportunities, just went like sand. I'm gonna have a little drink, just I've been talking too much. I mean, I don't mind if anyone else is drinking. I love me. There's been a bit of drinking through this time. I drank quite a lot in the first few weeks. I haven't drunk very much.
You need a drink after seeing your calendar before and after.
There we go.
So go on then, Sam. So obviously, the book had taken you on another journey in terms of using that to speak with corporations and help actually deliver genuine change through your thinking and through what you'd written about and what you'd researched, which must have been incredibly rewarding. And I know when we spoke, you were sort of ready to put down on paper what those learnings were, and then the crisis hit. So it'd be good just to share, what was the first week like, and how did your journey, from that first week when I think, you said, and we've just seen it in your diary, 98% of your bookings and therefore your income went away. How was that, and how has your journey been over these last few weeks?
So something's occurred to me. The first bit is, as you like, the real feeling of shit got real, and I think images that none of us imagined, and I don't think I'm probably fully processed. I think that the complexity or spectrum of PTSD out of all of these things for different people, the grief I have is not the monetary one, but the stability, and then at the same time the bizarre opportunistic possibility that things could really, really change. And then the most fundamental output I took was this: like, we are absolutely inadequately served. This is not unprecedented. This was expected. This was planned for. This has happened in our lifetime. This has happened before our lifetime. It was bound to happen. Bound. And the planning for it, which had been invested in before, had been underinvested in now. And I do not prescribe to the conspiracy theories, but I do prescribe to a level of inadequacy that challenges leadership, challenges the idea of leadership. And so I made sure that my immediate circumstances were right. And the next thing I did was I put out a post to all the young people who've ever come through Liberty: are you all right? My role with the young people of Liberty has always particularly been about the young entrepreneurs, of which Liberty has served so many thousands. I just said, I'll do 3 sessions. How are you doing? We'll put some time together. And I've done about 150 something now. And you know what? The kids are all right. And this thing began to really occur to me. that it didn't occur to me, it was told to me very clearly, and that's been the biggest learning of my whole life. The young people who've come through Liberty have taught me more than anything else. And this phrase has been going around my head, and I've been playing with it, and it's this, if I can get out of the way. What we need is a degree of uncertainty experts. So once I'd secured myself and reacclimatized to this world, once I'd like not grieved it and decided not just like bang all my stuff online and watch and observe, I started a series of interviews. The first person I interviewed is a man called Carl. I've known Carl for quite a while. He wrote a book about his time inside prison, and it's a prison survival guide. It's become a bestseller. And it's this notion of looking to the edges. We're all looking to the center, and the center cannot and does not and will not have the imagination that's required to reinvent at this moment. It's impossible for it to do so systemically. So when you start, I think, looking outside it, into some of the edges, into the shadows, this is where I find all of my inspiration from. So Carl told me this incredible story about where he found his inspiration to write the book, and he described it as the time between tides. And I was asking about lockdown, and I was trying to see if there was any kind of like appropriate comparison between lockdown and a long stretch. And Carl was in for quite a long stretch. And he talked about this fear of boredom that we have, this fear of isolation. And if you can get past that fear, if you can experience the time between tides, and if you can sit in it, if you can avoid the productivity panic or the aggressive baking or the whatever your response has been to this, in this time, in this space. And it was strange. It was, you know, we all have these conversations at the moment. How are you? And Hannah, really, how are you? And how are you really? Carl was the first person I've spoken to in this whole lockdown situation that sounded genuinely free. I said, how are you, Carl? He said, I'm fine. I've seen much worse shit than this. And there was something so strong in this thought. It's given me an awful lot. The next young person I spoke to was Sally Banks. She runs an organisation called Sour Lemons. If you don't know, then you should really get to know. It takes the kids who've been defined as failures, challenges the definitions, and makes them realise that the adversity they faced, the adversities that they face, become qualities in life, and particularly in crises. She advises across the cultural sector. She can advise any organisation in the creative industries, particularly how to address diversity, but fundamentally how to address creativity. Shade was a missing person when she was 14. She's now a phenomenal, very much not a missing, very much necessary and needed person. And this idea that adversity creates quality, I think is another core of what we could learn. One thing around space and reflection is time between tides, but from a young woman who really has seen it all. And I've gone on now. I've begun, and this is, I suppose, the lesson for me is needing a narrative, needing a creative hook. You know, I've spent my afternoon today getting excited about this talk, playing silly buggers and making, you know, first time I've done a talk with silly pictures behind me. I need that. I need that appetite to get into something. And I've now interviewed 12 uncertainty experts, people who live every single day in total uncertainty and make, certainly me, feel a sense of perspective over what we're going through by their management of it. This, my final example, this is Marcus. Marcus spent 25 years as a very successful career drug addict. He used to have to raise about £500 a day, so over his career, several £1 million, average annual salary of around 150 grand, and thought he was gone. Has died, been shot, been stabbed, died medically, died metaphysically. And he now runs one of the most successful social enterprises in the country, with zero of his participants going back into drug usage or even crime. He runs a film production company with a BAFTA award-winning pedigree. Absolutely phenomenal. And what he spoke about to me was, I think, really prevalent to anyone who's felt anxiety through this time. He spoke about holding a sense of fear very close to you, of knowing what it is that you've seen, knowing it is what you've gone through, knowing whether it's fear of going back to business as usual or fear of isolation, whatever your experience has been, and all the experience has been different, and holding hope just ahead of him, but naming and knowing your fear and letting it walk alongside you, rather than having this like dualistic relationship, running away from it or numbing it, but making it walk alongside you 2 steps back. So beside you, but behind you. So it drives you. Stepping towards his hope and his dreams always, but with his fear in the right place. And I was just floored by this man, and yet totally now unsurprised by his success. And my conclusion of all of this, as we're on these strange and unknown paths, and trying to be as creative and imaginative as we can about what's to come. And the survey out today saying only 9% of people would like things to go back as they are, and I think that's the biggest and the most interesting question we could possibly have. So then the question has to be what becomes. And for my take on it, it's about rules, and we can want as much as we want, but unless we systemically decide not just to make new rules but break old rules, and step into a place where I think we start to consider that the responsible thing to do is break rules, not that breaking rules ever sounded responsible to us, then we're not going to get anywhere. And this is my conclusion, and this is now my lifeline out of all this. So I'm having daily conversations with uncertainty experts and trying to find useful things that I can share with people who are facing uncertainty for the first time and finding it difficult.
Great, thanks, Sam. And just in terms of, obviously, you've spoken with, as you said, over 150 of the Liberty team, 12 uncertainty experts, and I'm sure many, many more. In terms of how you're going to take those learnings, those feelings, what have you got up next in terms of your next project?
Well, I'm trying to challenge myself. So I immediately started falling into a book. Oh, I'd write a book about this. And I had to immediately challenge myself. Well, is that just, that's just so obvious, isn't it? Like, what a cliche. Middle class, middle-aged white guy leaves agency, writes a book, but it's just like such a well-trodden path. So I'm very open-minded in terms of what the best avenue for sharing that information and knowledge is. I see with great interest the spike in good e-learning, and it's driven by a lot of money at the moment, like Masterclass and other things are really doing it, but there's no better e-learning platform than YouTube. The idea of writing narratives, not in a book form, but in a kind of structured learning form, but then using free platforms, that excites me quite a lot, especially with stories. The journeys that I've fallen through with Marcus and some of the other these guys right on the edges, because the mentoring with the young people I've done, they're fine, they're really fine. They're much better kind of coping with the pressure mentally, because many of them have seen next to nothing and they've come from next to nothing and they've made something, so they're not scared of it. It's the middle-aged professionals with 2 kids and a mortgage who are having a much harder time, and that's understandable, but the coping mechanisms of the kids who've seen real adversity are better. And so that's where it feels there's something useful to bring those 2 things together.
Great. Well, we look forward to seeing what that turns into. And obviously, you're very generous and talk very openly about what your projects are through all of your various channels, so we can follow that. I think we'll take a couple of questions. So, talking of breaking rules, here's one around the man of the moment. Do you think Dominic Cummings has reignited the rebellion in the British public?
Yeah, I do. I think he ignited a rebellion amongst the British public by his incredible, strategic, complex, sophisticated, and successful management of the Leave campaign. Like, if I could be, and I'm not, impartial about it, I think he did a fantastic job. I don't agree with it, and the results seem to have been declared and viewed and qualified as illegal numerous times. I don't agree with the strategy or even the intention. I think it's flawed beyond belief. But by God, he fucking did it well. And I think it's essential to learn. The outcome for me on that is, I think Dominic Cummings has activated himself very successfully as a citizen that many few of us do. We think the power only sits with institutions or politicians. And I think what Cummings represents is the power of an individual. And he understands that power is in a story, power is in populace, like a group of people. He understands power is in an idea. He understands power is in money. And then he understands that institutions of power are media, politics, and he's understood it. And I could tell you much better stories than Dominic Cummings around the world, from Taiwan to deep Chicago, from Soweto to Baltimore, from Buenos Aires to Bradford, that people were using his exact techniques, like, to much greater and better effect. So yeah, I think learn, watch, observe, disregard. and then apply those tactics and techniques for the good, fundamentally. But yeah, learn from Cummings. He's a specialist at what he's done. I don't like what he's done, but I hold my hat up, take my hat off to him. He's done it well.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit then around some of the people that you think have been real pirates and done really good things in the pandemic that have stood out to you, the things you do agree with.
Oh gosh, so I've surveyed this a lot, and the thing that everybody seems to hold closest is this sense of connection, and I think this is really interesting for us as human beings, like the benefit and value of connection in the least connected time that we've had. Like there is something in that just deserves diving into, and I don't think we've got close to it yet. I haven't seen the survey that I'm running. I'm doing a process of writing an essay that ends with a question, and the survey, the type form, and I'm getting a couple of hundred responses to that, then informs the next one. And the last question was around leadership, and there are two clear winners. I asked, cometh the hour, cometh the who. Who is the most important person who's demonstrated real leadership through this crisis? And there's two answers. The first is Jacinda Ardern, like fundamentally blown away, like this relatively tiny island, a leader who came to prominence, with some global recognition, not undeserved, but by God, disproportionate can turn to where she is, and just the level of respect and clearly understood, and how well she's handled it. It's just amazing. And I think that's really essential, because what she embodies is a type of leadership that's needed right now. What there is not is any reference to UK leadership, either in business or politics. There's a vacuum of imagination. There's a vacuum of people putting their neck out, and the majority of brands have retracted their oily necks anyway. There's ubiquity and baloney advertising, and there's some generosity, sure, but self-interested generosity. And then you get down to the street, and then you've got some really interesting examples of people not just organizing their street networks, but going above and beyond, looking after their neighbors. And obviously I don't disregard the care workers and the NHS staff, but the thing that really interests me about this moment is that those are still kind of pretty hero narratives, and there's this rather wonderful kind of I suppose poignant reflection that we have to consider about this. The first one is, so if the two biggest heroes that we've got of the hour, like leaders we've got of the hour, are Jacinda, and fantastic, and I'm glad that she exists, and then ourselves, the question really comes, well, what do we do next? One of the questions going around my head, like that I'd prompt to anyone, is what the fuck do we do with all of the WhatsApp groups? Like there's predicted to be something like 60% of the UK streets are now connected in a way that we weren't before. Like that's incredible. And at first that was really meaningful, and we could share toilet roll and do all sorts of great things. But now what are you going to do with it? Now what are you going to do with it? There's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity in this connection, in this moment. And there's also an opportunity to be lost. There's this great T.S. Lawrence quote after the Paris Agreement was signed at the end of the First World War in 1919. And he says, "We lived many lives in those whirling campaigns, never sparing ourselves. Yet when the new world dawned, the old men came out again, and they took our victory, and they remade it in the likeness of the former world that they knew." And I urge us to consider that tonight as we clap. The heroes of the hour, the new rules that could be written, the old men who will come out and take our victory from us and return a world to the one that we knew. Like, I've never felt, and I've obviously felt revolutionary before, I've never felt like the opportunity to go back to the question. I don't think I've seen it yet. I think it needs to come. I think perhaps when we get out of our houses a little bit, the chance is there with us all, the promise of doing things differently. So it's to you, to all of us on this conversation. I'm sure if you join in to talk to me, if you have anything about me, you'd be surprised how much power you've got. And if this hasn't identified or at least tickled the back of your imagination about how much power we each have got, it should have done. And if it hasn't, then drop me a line, because we can talk about it. This is our chance. It's our big and interesting, massive chance to take all the knowledge and skills and creativity and communication we've got to lay some pretty interesting new foundations for what might come.
Yeah, and we've just had a question in about that. I suppose the greatest fear is that we don't leverage it, because, you know, the question is, do you believe the pandemic will help us to become, in particular, more sustainable? And will this great change give us the opportunity to do better? And the ethos of Extinction Rebellion to actually transition into something larger, more global, more accepted, and more truly transformational, which is obviously what we need.
It's an excellent question, whoever asked that question, and the answer is, it's up to you, mate. Like, it really is. I'm fully committed to my local XR groups and the national XR groups. I think XR pretty much puts any agency in town to shame for how well they've commanded a story, how well they've maintained a narrative, how they haven't let it be disregarded, and even in the most difficult media times, they've maintained front page presence, not presently accepted. And they've got government to respond and business to respond, and everyone's terrified of them. There's not an agency that could compete. However, I think I have massive respect for them, and I also have massive reservations, because I don't think they offer the answers. I think they are the alarm bell that's necessary, but I don't think they offer the answers for what comes next. And the answer that comes next is you. Are we going to go back to business as usual? Yes, there's an overwhelming desire to, and you hear it every day. There's a campaign at the moment around the BBC. The BBC keep talking, the positive news of economic recovery. Like, we've really got to dissect these things. There is a positive economic recovery if it's a appropriate one. My copy of The Economist says a lot about me. It's just arrived. I'd run over there and get it. My Tesco delivery, that might be my Tesco delivery at the door. And it talks about exactly this. This is our opportunity, our fundamental opportunity. But it's not going to be achieved by us watching. It's going to be achieved by us participating. The biggest impact that any individual can make, as we've seen recent reports, is more in our consumerism behaviours than ever we thought, especially when consumer economies is as weak as it is. If we choose not to fly, if we choose to change our eating habits, if you all divest immediately from Barclays, Lloyds, HSBC, Santander. Barclays is the #1 biggest investor in fossil fuels in the UK, in Europe, and it has 24 million customers in the UK. Like, there are very straightforward things that we can do. If we've been given some appetite, right? There's no point having appetite and then being daunted by how big it is. And then, yes, mobilize, then, yes, get involved. And it all starts with your street. What's this street going to do collectively? What's our community going to do? The power of organizing is the answer to this question. Sorry, it's a long answer. The point is, it starts with you, and then don't feel the need to leap up to unachievable echelons. Individual actions, local organizing, and yes, I absolutely believe this is the pivotal moment where we can win it, because we weren't going to, and if we fail this one, then there is nothing but a fairly bleak outlook ahead.
Great, thank you. And that answers Robin and I think Elaine's question. And then just building on, I suppose, the environmental factors we're being asked, or you're being asked, do we need to look at the metrics we are using to judge everything from top to bottom, from governments all the way down, including economics?
Good, amazing question. Thank you for that. No. Well, I'm getting better educated on this. I'm not academic. I didn't go to university, and I'm regretting that more the older I get. But even the Keynesian thinking suggested that we should never determine things by the singular metric of financial success. We have one measure of success currently, and it's growth, and it's suicide. We're 62% over our biosphere capacity. We're done. So any model that relates to consumerism is war crime, effectively. And this is a big question for the advertising and marketing industry, because we're the precursor to business growth. So do you want to be the signature on humanity's suicide note for the campaign that you're working on for Chicken Tonight, or some shit thing that doesn't contribute anything? Or is this our chance, right? And you know, some of the best creatives, like who's got the Barclays account, BBH, you know, so some of the best creatives out there, if you're out there, are working with the criminals at the moment. This is our time. This is our moment. This is our, you know, what are you going to step away from? Like the metrics of it cannot be defined by that which we've grown up with. I think fundamentally there has to be a step away from singular notions of profit and growth. So then where do you go? That's pretty difficult. Gross domestic happiness didn't really seem to work out. You push yourself all the way to UBI. That doesn't seem appropriate to a lot of people. It requires a lot more depth and thought. But I think there is an individual question here about what are you okay with, and I think that's one of the biggest shifts that we can make. Are you all right with what you're working on? And the abdication of responsibility in many of our organizations, the relinquishment of agency, yeah, again, goes back to the point, you're more powerful than you think you are. Devolving it to metrics or other people's standards or ideals of success, you know, relinquishes some of the degree of your own responsibility. Are you all right with it? Do you work at BBH or whatever the places you work? You know, are you okay with all your clients? Have you access to all that? Are they actually, you know, lobbying for the exact ingredients that lead us towards a guaranteed catastrophe? Then you have power. You have loads of power. Complain, resist, organize. You know, you don't have to resign. I'm not talking about the unnecessary extremes, but just mobilize. There's power in all of you, way more power than maybe you think.
Great. So we're going to move the conversation a little bit now, just because obviously we're talking about changing the world. We have a question, and I think we know the answer to this one, but I'll ask it and maybe we can go a little deeper. In terms of, Robin asked, do you think that more young people should be around the decision-making table rather than being dismissed? And I suppose that broadens out to really the role that young people are and can play in the change that you've just been talking about.
Oh, well, controversially, possibly, Robin. Thank you for a very good question. If I was young, I mean, internally, I still think I am. Would I show up? Probably not. Really? So should they be? In one sense, yes, we all should be. Would you show up? Boris Johnson? The current cabinet in the UK, the longest standing member of the cabinet has just over 2 years experience. Do you know who that is? Boris Johnson. We have the least experienced cabinet we've ever had, ever in the history of British politics. Imagine if unless you're like a fucking super cool startup, like, and you've got two 16-year-old founders who've raised £1 billion, like, it's not cool to have a board with less than 2 years experience. Certainly not when you're running a country. So no, I wouldn't fucking show up. I used to love getting invited to number 10. I was like, this, you know, this is where I believe the center of power is. I haven't been for ages. I kept hoping that I'd go there and meet some smart motherfuckers under the stairs with a long-term plan, but they ain't there. So yes, they should be at the table, I fundamentally would say, but should you show up to a table of ineffective decision making? Yes, probably you should, and you should try and make it better. So my main advice to young people would be the same thing that we just said. There's a different way of organizing. My guess is the larger institutions of education and, you know, Westminster parliamentary democracy will be defunct in the mid to near term, and the new systems are already arising. You know, we're seeing it certainly in education. There's no bigger university than YouTube. It's not qualified, but I've seen young people change their lives firsthand through learning, and the same will go for democracy, certainly in the parliamentary sense. So I'd be more encouraging of young people to organise locally, to create citizen assemblies, to find opportunities of participatory budget setting, and where possible, non-violent direct action. I think, you know, we need to sow the seeds of what comes next. I'm less inclined to invest in something that has a sense of morbidity to it. Not that I'm despondent or pessimistic, I'm deeply optimistic, but, you know, invest where the energy is.
That's great advice. So yes, be at the table, but maybe create the table or be at the right table.
Yeah. Show up and chop the table up, and show them what can be done. There needs to be like someone needs to grab those motherfuckers by the things.
Indeed, they do. Okay, so just wanted to, we've got about 10 minutes left, so please do get your questions in. I'm going to come to a couple of questions in a minute, but wanted to really drill down a little bit around, obviously, Liberty work with, as an amazing community and also with some very large brands, and be really interesting to see how has Liberty fared through the pandemic, and has there been particular asks or interesting projects that have come the team's way where brands are grappling with how to engage during these times?
Liberty's all right. I think it seems very, very clearly there's three. I know lots of agencies that are having a very hard time, and if any of you are founders or trying to run an agency and having a hard time, I've seen quite a lot of. If you want to get in touch, then I've seen quite a lot of tactics that people are using to try and get out of it, and that would happily sit in the kind of space I'm offering up for mentoring. And I think we're going to see a lot of people go to the wire, sadly. And then there's lots of agencies that are doing really well, like the busiest they've been. Like I've just been someone from Lad Bible. I can't remember the name of their agency, part of it fast. Anyway, and they're off the chart. So people who fit the mode. You can do it digitally, you can do it remotely, you can get it out accessibly, are doing incredibly well. And the unexpected surprises. And there's a general sense within the broader agency world that there will be a roar of the economy in autumn, and brands will start spending, and everything will come back. And I find myself slightly challenged within the middle of that. And Liberty is totally within the middle of that. There's lots of really good opportunities, and we're lucky we have some very loyal and long-standing clients, and some clients who are really resolutely invested in young people, and the network remains strong. The network is national and broadly digital, so there's incredible young people, and the team there are doing a fantastic job making sure young people are finding more opportunities to engage in. And the epicenter of Liberty's offices, and if you've never been to Liberty's offices, I'd invite you all down there to see this incredible chemistry of smart young people and advertising and marketing creatives come together when there's time to do so. But the message, the principle of Liberty seems to be stronger than ever. That seems to be the inbound request. The search for purpose and a meaning, and not in just in a brand sense, but in a business sense. How can we put audiences like at the heart of what we're doing? I mean, most of the pandemic advertising has been kind of Liberty playbook. Real stories, real people, heart of what we do. We matter because we do this. This has been. We've always tried to be après purpose, like what goes beyond it being just a purpose message for a long, long time. What really makes a difference. So, without being cynical about the catch-up role people are playing, and then I suppose the job for Liberty now is to really push out ahead again. So, and fundamentally and sadly, I think for the next few years, the future looks pretty bleak for young people. I think they will bear the brunt of the cost. I think opportunities will diminish. I think money will become more expensive. I think training programs will reduce, and the chances of where we were 5-6 years ago, when there was a lot of frustration amongst young people, are likely to return. So organisations like Liberty will be more meaningful, and hopefully the model that Liberty's shown that other agencies can employ to their own benefit, creatively, purposely, profitably. Perhaps that's the real opportunity to grow now, but not just Liberty to grow, but for more organisations to take on the same model. And Liberty has always given its model away freely. So come down, take a look, and see how you can help some young people and help your business as well.
Great. I wanted to talk to you about that because obviously Liberty is very successful and has a 20-year track record. Has the model been followed a lot? I would have thought that the model would have been adopted more than maybe it has, and just really keen to get your insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has quite a bit. Certainly when I was getting ready to hand over to Alex, I was very wary of. I mean, Dentsu Aegis started, what was it called, 42, 46, that was led by some really, really smart young people. What's his name, Dan? Iris left and started a thing with one of our ex-young people, Shanice, one of the smartest young people we'd ever worked with, the Elephant Room. So you got some quite big and interesting collaborations going on, and I think but I always said the biggest competitors were going to be the young people who'd come through our network, and they were like BJ Munega and others. Like, you just started up incredible organizations that really, you know, would find ourselves suddenly pitching against young people who come through literacy. I hope you win. But I think the biggest change is you know, winning the Bemis thing noted that, and this is the real success for anyone who's trying to change the world, is redundancy. If you're going to change the world, you don't come out as the winner, like on some kind of platform, like I'm the one that changed the world, because that doesn't happen. The hero narrative of the individual that changed the world is for movies alone. You change frames, you change the story, others adapt it, then people adopt it. And from where I began 20 years ago in all this mess, the idea that you'd have a campaign of, you know, even though there's so many holes in the purpose narrative at the moment in brands, the very idea of it was so alien. You know, 2001, Naomi Klein had just published No Logo, and that was an outsider view of where we were. So the biggest threat to Liberty's existential existence is creatively the young people that come through it and will replace it with something better. And really, I'd like to see that happen, because that's nature and that's good. But the success that Liberty will have is that the industry has moved on, and we fundamentally, at very, very large levels in very large organizations, talk very seriously about commitment to our audiences, them not just being our opportunity but our responsibility, involving them in the diet. So great, and that's Liberty's biggest success, and should be therefore challenge it. But I think Alex and the team have responded accordingly, and they've powered down on the niches. You know, the creative network that Liberty now has. In my day, we were much more in the kind of like chaotic edges, the uncertainty experts. The network Liberty's got now, young creators, like mind blowing, like the coolest, most exciting and innovative young up and coming stars. So, you know, they know exactly where they're taking it for what comes next, and hopefully the industry will continue to follow.
Great. And a question around what advice do you have for people wanting to create a creative social enterprise?
Do it now. Like, this is going to be a good time to do it. There will be an influx of money into the social enterprise and startup space for sure. There'll be tax breaks for it, as there have been before. But whatever you do, one of the biggest challenges in social enterprise is like, there's already a degree of ego in entrepreneurship anyway. And then it's magnified in social entrepreneurship, because there's this idea that you can do a thing that's going to like exist, and then you're going to do a thing that's going to change the world. So the need to validate your idea, the need to validate the need for your idea is greater than ever. It can't just be right. You know, those poor guys, they really need us to go and save them. You know, if you have an idea for a community, for an environment, for something that's going to work, just spend as much time as you can in that community and in that environment, and validate the need. I mean, that's natural advice for any organization, but more in social enterprise than anywhere else. And then if you've got it and you're really sure of it, then drop me a line and I will connect you to the incredible infrastructure of social enterprise that is around the UK.
Great, thanks, Sam. So we're getting into the last question. So do post if you've got any more. I'm going to go from the world at large, then to young people, and then to you. So we have a question on, it's clear that you have a very active, vibrant and active brain. How do you switch off that busy mind when you want to relax and achieve calm? Any tips are gratefully received. He says, picking up his wine.
Got the wine of it. I actually had a week off the booze. The first couple of weeks I drank too much, I'll admit, and then I've really enjoyed the rest of it, where I really haven't, and I've really been exercise. I tell you what, I asked this question to a very wise chap I know, and we ended up, the conversation was about the journey inwards. Like, we'll try not to get too out there now, but what are you seeking for a person who's asked the question? Like, is it just to relax? Like, that's easy. Watch Netflix and have a glass of wine. Is it really, really to relax? Well, that's also easy. Go and have a run and release serotonin around your body, or do some meditation, you know, or is it something else? What's not relaxed? Like, for me, what's not relaxed is the thoughts that go around my head, the the unnecessary guilt I carry around, the question how I could have done things differently the last few years. Like, I have my daughters with me half the week, and how much I miss them when they're not here. Like, you know, the really difficult stuff, and the difficult stuff requires something deeper. So it depends what you mean by relaxed. Mine is complex, and I have found excellent solace in the recommendation of Carl, my prisoner friend, in really making uncomfortable space, like an hour of not doing anything, like really uncomfortable space, no nothing. And within that space, exploring yourself, not how it might sound, and thinking about the most difficult stuff. I've just begun a course on deep relating. I've started a course on philosophy. And I found my mental appetite for that is huge. I just didn't know. And the weirdest one is I've started Wim Hoffman's weird breathing course, the Iceman, who's a nutter, as far as I can tell. But because I heard him talk about the science of what he does, I've started it. I'm a week in. I feel fucking great. So I would urge you to define what you mean by relax. Is there something deeper? And if there is, then move appropriately to that. Give yourself real space to find the most uncomfortable parts of that question, and then move to that. And if it's a bit of a fix in between, try Wim Hoffman's app. It's great.
There we go. Fantastic. I think that's all the questions on the chat. People have loved and been inspired by your answers. So Sam, thank you for the generosity of your time, but also the openness that you talk about all things life and work. It's really much appreciated, and it's been fascinating to be part of the conversation.
It's a pleasure. I start my email up there because we discussed not going and banging on about the book, but I'm not supposed to give the book away, but I'm a bit over it now. So if you drop me an email, you'll get set my out of office on, and you'll get a bounce back with some of the audiobook and some of the Kindle book. And if you're inspired by that, join the movement. A wonderful woman called Alex has taken over another Alex has taken over the Be More Pirate community, which is now spread internationally, of people creating mutinies in their organizations, in their societies, in their communities. It's grown massively through the pandemic. So if you're frustrated, motivated, inspired, or in any way want to do something, then being a pirate, send us a link. You'll get a link. Send us an email. You'll get a link immediately back, and let's go.
And I listened to the audio book, and you get actually to hear you narrating it, which is fantastic. Double bonus. Great. Well, so as I said, Sam will be over on Twitter, so do please carry on the conversation. I know people are saying thank you, so thank you again from us. Holly, are you jumping in now?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. Thanks, Nat, for hosting, and thank you, Sam. That was amazing. You covered off a lot. My head is like bursting. So this session will be live on YouTube very shortly. So if you want to watch it maybe another 4 times to just soak everything up, please do. As Nat just said, Sam has very kindly offered to host an after party on Twitter for a quarter of an hour or so. So please do take him up on, what was it, business advice, mentoring, everything else. And
until the Tesco delivery arrives.
Until the Tesco delivery arrives. And I guess last but not least, in 2 weeks' time, we have our next An Audience With on the 11th of June, and it's with Una King, who was a Labour Member of Parliament in the early 2000s, then went on to head up Inclusion Diversity for Channel 4, Twitter, and is now VP of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion for Snap. So she will be beaming in from California, LA, somewhere. So it should be a really good one. But thanks again, Sam. That was fantastic. And I hope everyone has a really good rest of their evening. Thanks.